Welcome, viewers. For years, American power safely protected the Saudi kingdom's massive wealth. As the king of global oil, Riyadh built its grand future under a bulletproof American shield. But right across the Persian Gulf, their ultimate rival was arming deadly missiles, waiting to strike. Then, in a single night, a massive swarm of suicide drones shattered that illusion, burning the sand. The devastating shock was not just the burning oil, it was the chilling silence from Washington. To understand this modern crisis, we must look at the foundation of this deep global bond. Historical records state that the alliance began with a simple trade: cheap oil for firm defense. American presidents promised to defend the Desert Kingdom against any foreign military threat. Billions of dollars flowed into buying the most advanced Patriot missile defense systems. The Saudi royal family slept peacefully, trusting the mighty Western shield to guard their holy lands. Riyadh became a shining jewel, fueled by vast underground oceans of highly profitable black gold. Meanwhile, across the water, the Iranian military constantly expanded its aggressive proxy forces. Tehran viewed the Saudi kingdom as a regional puppet, heavily controlled by Western influences. The tactical war room in Riyadh closely monitored every Iranian missile launch with deep concern. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman knew his grand vision required absolute stability and total peace. He envisioned a futuristic utopia called Neom, a massive city built entirely from scratch. This ambitious project aimed to completely end the nation's historical addiction to crude oil. But building a trillion-dollar paradise is impossible if enemy rockets fall from the dark sky. Therefore, the unwritten contract with Washington was the crucial foundation of his grand design. Western diplomats constantly reassured the royal court that their formidable defense was rock solid. However, geopolitical experts warn that relying on a distant empire always carries hidden risks. The Middle Eastern chessboard is notoriously complex, filled with sudden betrayals and shifting goals. American foreign policy began slowly shifting its focus toward the rising threats in Eastern Asia. The Middle East was no longer the sole strategic priority for the tired political establishment. Despite these subtle warnings, the Saudi leadership continued trusting their historical security pact. They believed their massive investments in American arms would guarantee permanent military support. The sleek Patriot missile batteries stood tall in the desert, pointing toward the Persian Gulf shores. They were supposed to intercept any incoming aerial threat before it could reach the vital targets. But the nature of modern warfare was rapidly changing, evolving beyond traditional ballistic strikes. Iranian engineers were secretly developing cheap, low-flying suicide drones to bypass radar nets. These highly maneuverable weapons were specifically designed to exploit the blind spots of the system. The traditional American shield was built for conventional wars, not asymmetric drone swarm tactics. The geopolitical stage was perfectly set for a devastating clash between two vastly different powers. On one side, the wealthy Desert Kingdom, heavily armed with expensive Western military technology. On the other side, a heavily sanctioned regime utilizing cheap, innovative, and deadly proxy warfare. The tensions steadily escalated as fiery political rhetoric echoed across the divided regional waters. Intelligence reports repeatedly indicated a high probability of a targeted Iranian military strike. Yet a dangerous sense of false security prevailed within the heavily fortified royal palaces. They simply could not imagine a scenario where their vital oil infrastructure would burn completely. History, however, always punishes those who blindly trust the comforting promises of fading empires. September 14th, 2019. A date permanently burned into the Saudi consciousness. Under the cover of total darkness, a massive swarm of hostile drones crossed the silent desert sky. They flew dangerously low, completely avoiding the billion-dollar American radar detection systems. Their primary target was Abqaiq, the undisputed beating heart of the global oil processing network. Suddenly, deafening explosions shattered the quiet night, sending massive fireballs into the dark air. The world's largest oil processing facility was brutally struck with absolute pinpoint precision. Thick black smoke completely choked the atmosphere, turning the bright morning sky into dark twilight. Brave local firefighters desperately battled the towering flames, facing an apocalyptic inferno. Sirens wailed continuously across the burning complex, signaling a catastrophic global energy crisis. Nearly half of the kingdom's daily oil production was instantly wiped out by the precise strikes. The global energy markets immediately panicked, causing crude prices to violently spike overnight. Inside the royal war room, the atmosphere was thick with absolute shock, disbelief, and rising anger. The Crown Prince stared at the tactical screens, witnessing the devastating failure of his defenses. But the physical destruction of the vital facility was not the most terrifying aspect of the attack. The true nightmare began when Riyadh desperately looked toward Washington for immediate military help. They fully expected a massive retaliatory strike against the Iranian proxy forces within hours. After all, the sacred defensive pact dictated that an attack on Saudi oil was an attack on the West. Instead of sending bomber squadrons, the American leadership offered only hollow words of support. There was no military intervention. There was no fiery retaliation to protect the vulnerable ally. The White House clearly signaled that it would not risk a massive regional war over desert oil. If you were leading a nation, and your strongest ally abandoned you, what would be your next bold move? That deafening silence from the West shattered the core foundation of the historic security alliance. The realization hit the Saudi leadership like a physical blow. They were completely on their own now. The mighty American shield had tragically proven to be nothing more than a fragile political illusion. Years of spending billions on sophisticated Western weapons had ultimately failed to prevent the fire. The kingdom's absolute vulnerability was suddenly exposed for the entire watching world to clearly see. The strategic calculation in Tehran had worked perfectly, pushing the boundaries without facing war. Iran had successfully demonstrated its terrifying ability to cripple the Saudi economy at any moment. The smoldering ruins of Abqaiq served as a harsh wake-up call for the ambitious Crown Prince. He recognized that the geopolitical rules of the modern Middle East had fundamentally changed forever. A profound paradigm shift was urgently required to ensure the survival of his grand future vision. Vision 2030 could not be built on a fragile base of constant military fear. Foreign investors would never bring their trillions to a dangerous war zone, constantly under attack. To secure the kingdom's prosperous future, the leadership had to embrace a cold, pragmatic approach. The old era of blind loyalty to Western powers was officially declared dead in the royal courts. From this pivotal moment of crisis, a bold new doctrine slowly began to emerge from the ashes. The concept of Saudi first became the driving force behind every major geopolitical decision. The Crown Prince meticulously analyzed the complex global chessboard to find a new strategic balance. If American protection was unreliable, the kingdom needed to forge new and diverse partnerships. They started looking east, recognizing the rapidly growing economic and political power of China. Beijing offered a highly attractive alternative: massive trade deals with absolutely no political lectures. The Chinese diplomatic machine operated quietly, focusing purely on mutual economic benefit and growth. History shows that rising powers often fill the spaces left by fading empires. Saudi leaders eagerly welcomed the Eastern diplomats, signaling a historic shift in global alliances. Meanwhile, the relationship with Washington continued to steadily deteriorate over oil production quotas. When the West desperately demanded more oil to lower global prices, Riyadh coldly refused to comply. They clearly demonstrated their newfound independence, prioritizing their own national economic interests. This bold defiance shocked Western politicians, who were entirely accustomed to absolute compliance. The Desert Kingdom was rapidly transforming from a dependent client state into an independent power. But the most stunning geopolitical maneuver was still secretly developing behind tightly closed doors. To truly secure the massive Neom project, the Crown Prince had to neutralize his greatest enemy. A prolonged military conflict with Iran would absolutely guarantee mutual economic destruction for both. Therefore, the most logical, yet incredibly difficult step was to pursue a highly controversial peace. Secret negotiations began in neutral territories, cautiously exploring the possibility of reconciliation. Decades of deep religious and political hatred could not be simply erased in a few short meetings. However, the shared desire for regional stability provided a fragile common ground for the diplomats. Both nations secretly recognized that endless proxy wars were draining their vital national resources. The world watched in absolute disbelief as rumors of a potential historic agreement began to spread. The architectural blueprints for a peaceful future required burying the bloody hatchet of the past. It was a massive geopolitical gamble, balancing precariously on the sharp edge of a deadly sword. To achieve this fragile peace, a highly powerful and neutral mediator was clearly needed. The United States could no longer play this role due to its heavy political bias. Enter China, quietly waiting to cement its growing influence in the Middle East. In early 2023, the world witnessed a truly stunning diplomatic victory. Senior diplomats from Riyadh and Tehran finally shook hands in a historic meeting in Beijing. This monumental agreement formally restored their severed diplomatic relations. The sudden Chinese-brokered deal clearly signaled a massive shift in the global balance of power. Washington watched with deep unease as its traditional rival secured the historic peace. But the Saudi Crown Prince had successfully achieved his most vital strategic objective. He effectively neutralized the immediate threat of devastating Iranian strikes. With the northern border secured, he could now focus entirely on domestic ambitions. The massive construction machines at the Neom site could finally operate without fear. The grand architectural vision of a post-oil utopia was firmly back on track. But Saudi First meant much more than just securing peace with dangerous regional rivals. It also meant actively resisting the overwhelming pressure from Western allies. When global energy markets faced severe shortages, the West demanded more production. American leaders personally traveled to the Desert Kingdom to secure lower prices. However, the royal court coldly refused to sacrifice their economic profits. They maintained strict production limits, keeping global oil prices highly profitable for them. This bold defiance clearly demonstrated the death of the old, subservient alliance. Riyadh was no longer a compliant chess piece to be moved by distant foreign powers. They were actively playing the major superpowers against each other for leverage. Balancing American defense ties with lucrative Chinese and Russian partnerships. The Crown Prince proved to be a masterful player in this dangerous geopolitical game. By refusing to take sides, he transformed the kingdom into an independent power center. The era of absolute reliance on a single global protector was officially over. Instead, they built a complex web of strategic alliances to ensure long-term survival. This calculated pragmatism shocked many, but it secured the necessary domestic peace. The gleaming towers of the new futuristic cities slowly rose from the harsh desert sands. But the intricate tightrope walk of Middle Eastern politics is incredibly unforgiving. Every diplomatic move creates complex ripples that can easily trigger new disasters. While the Saudi-Iranian peace temporarily cooled the threat in the Persian Gulf, another major diplomatic effort was quietly gathering a highly dangerous momentum. The royal kingdom was secretly considering a historic normalization of ties. This potential megadeal was designed to radically reshape the entire Middle East. American diplomats aggressively pushed this treaty as their ultimate foreign policy win. Riyadh saw it as a unique chance to gain advanced technology and strong security backups. They demanded high-level nuclear cooperation to finally recognize the Jewish state. The complex negotiation seemed incredibly promising, moving closer to a signing. But experts often forget that regional peace deals can profoundly isolate desperate factions. The potential Saudi-Israeli alliance terrified those who felt abandoned by the tides. Radical elements realized the historical cause was being marginalized by these new pacts. They violently understood that the approaching peace would permanently erase all their leverage. As the Saudi kingdom confidently built its future, a massive storm was quietly brewing. The diplomatic efforts to stabilize the region had inadvertently lit a dangerous fuse. Sometimes the desperate pursuit of peace accidentally plants the bloody seeds of a future war. A devastating tragedy was about to unfold, shattering the fragile illusion of control. Mohammed bin Salman transformed his nation into a true power. But at what final cost? Is leaving America a brilliant masterstroke, or a dangerous gamble? Share your thoughts below. If you enjoyed this deep geopolitical dive, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel.